Many are asking how an app that appears to be little more than an unconventional cab service got an $18 billion valuation. Here with more details on the Uber story is Sam Chester, analyst at Clarity Capital. Sam, thanks for being here.
It's a pleasure.
Okay, so what's going on here? $18 billion? Isn't that overvalued?
I think there's different ways of looking at it. Most objective assessments of Uber, looking at the revenue stream and other factors, have valued the company around $6 billion,
right,
which means the company, as valued today, over 300% overvalued. Why? Why may this be so? I think part of the reason you could look at is that there's an irrational exuberance that takes hold in the tech communities, where you have investors and innovators living in the same bubble community, mostly in Silicon Valley in California,
right,
believing in the same belief that tech can solve everything. And as a result, as we saw in the high-tech bubble in the late 90s, that irrational exuberance can lead to bubbles and overvaluation.
Looking more recently, I mean, like we've seen over the past year, all these different apps, all these different companies basically going for IPOs and just being what a lot of people think is overvalued tremendously. I mean, just a couple of billion here, a couple of billion there, you know, it's unbelievable.
I agree, though. I think there is another side of the story, which is based in this idea of a disruptive technology. Essentially, Uber, like some of these other apps that you mentioned, is seen as upending the way that we've done business until now.
Yeah.
Examples that people are very familiar with: Facebook changed the way that we socialize. Amazon changed the way that people purchase goods and obtain goods. So in Uber's case, not only are they trying to transform and redefine the way that you get from point A to point B, but what they're really trying to do is change the culture and the society of ownership. So that instead of living in an ownership society, we live in a society of sharing. So instead of buying things, we're renting things. And that concept is seen as so disruptive that it could introduce into business interactions in our daily life, similar to Facebook, similar to Amazon, and that potentially is a $20 billion idea.
I do have to interject here. I mean, I very much like your assessment there, but at the same time, okay, you know, you look at Amazon. I mean, you just said Amazon and Facebook in the same sentence, which in and of itself really kind of bothers me, because Amazon is a company we've seen since the mid-90s. You know, they've actually given a very clear product and service, which has changed over time, but, you know, we have history proving that Amazon made sense. We don't necessarily know what's going to happen with Facebook, and we certainly don't know what's going to happen with Uber, right?
For sure. There's no question that a big part of this recent valuation for Uber is based upon what could become. I think to contrast it, though, with companies like Twitter, which is valued at almost $25 billion, or at Facebook, which is obviously far more, supports the case for Uber even, because Uber, unlike Twitter and unlike Facebook, it's not getting its revenue stream from advertising, which is an unpredictable market. Uber's revenue stream comes from the interaction and the purchase, the renting of a good and of a service, of someone picking you up in a vehicle and getting you from one place to another. The other point I would add is that, as savvy investors know, when a company is able to, what we call in the financial world, take advantage of the consumer surplus, which Uber does by this concept called surge pricing, where essentially, unlike typical cab companies, what Uber does is that after a sporting event, during bad weather, Uber charges more for a ride than the standard fare. So by varying their pricing, they take advantage of when participants are willing to pay more, and that's very attractive to investors.
Now, this is obviously attractive to investors, and it's certainly filling someone's pockets. But is it fair? I mean, I'm talking not just about the consumers, but I'm talking also about the other cab drivers out there. You know, this is their living. I mean, we've seen a lot of protests happening.
For sure. Uber is a very aggressive company, and much of their success, they haven't reinvented the wheel, literally. What they do is they're very aggressive, and they move into markets. They face competition from local taxi companies, which tend to not only be monopolies, and not only be localized companies with strong connections to the local municipality, but they're backed up by a regulatory system that doesn't support a technology and like Uber. As a result, you see, as the report suggested, tremendous resentment. And what's interesting for Uber, actually, and it's been a product of its success, is that Uber has taken bad PR and transformed it into what has worked for Uber, good PR. Protests in Paris, protests in San Francisco from drivers, from passengers just upset about surge pricing, has actually led Uber to expand and to get its name out there even more to more and more and more consumers.
Okay. Sam Chester from Clarity Capital, thank you very much for joining us and for giving us more on the Uber story.
It's always a pleasure.
Indeed.